What's up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of the Powerhouse Podcast, coming to you live from the mom car again today with little Willow. We call her Willis to be funny in the back. Today we're going to be talking about something so incredibly important. I want you to take notes, strap in, listen up, because my goodness, if I could have known this even, 10 years ago in my early 20s, this would have radically changed my life. So listen up, share this with a friend. As always, if you have not downloaded our free course yet, you guys can go to powerhousepageantry.com/free course. P.S. We are totally revamping our website right now to reflect our new offers and a little bit new marketing language of who we are. I am so excited about that, so stay tuned, powerhousepageantry.com, because it's going to be looking fresh. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the 3 ways that human beings express emotions. This I originally stole from one of my business mentors, who is named Taylor Welch. Go check out his stuff. He is brilliant with all things entrepreneurship, faith, family. Oh, you can hear little Willow in the background. Hopefully she doesn't start screaming. #MomLife. Oh, she's talking. Hi, baby girl. Fun fact, get your kid to stop crying, put them in the car, and start driving. They love the motion. So talking about 3 ways that people express emotions. This is super, super important to understand, because so often we are experiencing life, especially as a high achiever, we're constantly achieving, checking things off our to-do list, and then how many of y'all know that we hit a breaking point and all of a sudden we have a meltdown, we feel extremely overwhelmed, we find ourselves overeating and eating a tub of ice cream, or undereating, right? These different manifestations of emotions because we're not actually processing emotions. One of the things that we do inside of the Powerhouse Club and the Academy is we study emotions. We literally study the emotional wheel. We study feeling words. And this really comes from a revelation of when I was in an abusive relationship 5+ years ago and was dating a narcissist at the time. And if you know anything about dating a narcissist, what happens when you're with someone like that, or who has a personality disorder or mutation, whatever you want to call it, you're basically not allowed to feel, right? You're in fight or flight or freeze constantly, and it causes you to become a shell of yourself, your personality, your identity. And so in that time, I was in a really dark place for a year. If you don't know my full testimony, you can listen to other episodes of this podcast, because you'll find it in there somewhere. I mentioned it quite a bit. Maybe it's time for a refresh. I actually need to do a whole new episode on that. Let me know in the comments or on Instagram, or send us an email, info@powerhousepageantry.com, if you would like to hear that, because I'd be happy to share it again. But anyways, just my emotions were incredibly suppressed for a year, because it was my coping mechanism just to survive and to try and basically win against the narcissist, which the only way to win is to not play the game. So I'm really passionate about this, because I had to crawl out of my own hole of doom, if you will, of having absolutely no understanding of how to express my emotions, how to communicate my emotions, because it didn't feel safe, right? And so I want you just to take note of your current situation today, and take note of what things feel like, maybe how you were raised, what situations that you're going through in life right now, and look at your history of how you think that you were taught to process emotions, how you're currently processing emotions, and maybe even give yourself a rating of a 1 to a 10, 10 being the best, of how well you think you process emotions. And this will be incredibly helpful for you if you apply it. So there are 3 ways that human beings process emotions. 1 is to express them. Number 2 is to suppress them. And number 3 is to escape them. I'm going to say that again. 1 is to express them, 2 is to suppress them, and 3 is to escape them. Now, each of them have their place, but I'm going to go into detail more deeply with each of these, and tell you the purpose and how these things all come about and how they manifest. So first and foremost, the healthiest way is to express our emotions. Now, we want to learn how to express our emotions. It's important to being able to say, I'm hungry, angry, lonely, tired, sad, disappointed, worried, anxious, whatever, right? I'm fearful. I'm experiencing blank. That's where the emotional wheel can be super helpful. They say don't make a decision when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And my husband and I definitely remind each other of that. I actually just reminded my husband of that yesterday because we had something kind of crazy happen in the last 48 hours, which we had an opportunity to freak out and have a very expressive emotion towards, something that wasn't our fault, but definitely affected us. And my husband, in that moment we naturally are very expressive when it comes to our emotions, sometimes too expressive. And he was ready to make a decision in that moment. And I said, babe, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, I don't think now is the right time to make a decision. Let's sleep on it. And if you feel the same way tomorrow, then let's go ahead and move forward with that decision. Now, some other people don't know how to express their emotions, and so they suppress their emotions. And, while it's not always the time to speak outwardly about something, like I'm not saying in every single situation you should get loud, raise your voice, speak your mind, those kinds of things. But especially in intimate relationships, close friendships, things like that, just be very mindful. Certain personalities are like the kind of personality where they are bubbling on the inside. They definitely have thoughts, opinions, emotions about things, but until you absolutely push their buttons to the full, until they absolutely pop off, they're not going to say anything. So if you're that personality that naturally suppresses things, in relationships they'll call that the hedgehog personality. It's somebody that hides and that doesn't want to talk about things and wants to internally process a lot of things until maybe, finally the pop bottle's gotten shaken so much that they just pop off, right? And it expresses anger or extreme disappointment, or they completely remove themselves from a situation. In extreme cases, this is where someone will be disappointing their spouse in some way, or underperforming, or, whatever, and a spouse doesn't say anything for 20 years. And then when the kids are off to college and they're empty nesters, all of a sudden, even though one spouse thinks that there's absolutely no problem, the other spouse turns to them and says, I want a divorce. And they're like, what? And they feel completely blindsided, when in reality, this person who's been suppressing that emotion for 20 years is like, no, this has been happening for 20 years, right? So it's really, really important to share our emotions and think of it as like letting air out of a balloon ever so slightly, that psst, 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 psst. Like we want little wisps of that so the balloon doesn't get so full that it creates this giant loud boom that creates a startle reflex and everyone's freaking out because it just sounded like an atomic bomb went off, right? And that's because an atomic bomb did go off inside of someone. That's how big the emotion felt, okay? Now, when it comes to expression, again, we don't want to live in this over-expressive, everything's a 10 out of 10, everything is anger and loud and big, and I need to be heard, and all these kinds of things too, right? Like, we want to live a life of balance, and that's why the journey of personal development and really growing a life of faith as well and identity is learning how to express emotions in a second-by-second conversation with yourself, with the Lord, and then having the courage and also the safety to be able to communicate those emotions safely with people that are really close to you, right? Like I unfortunately have heard from several marriages that have, after just a few years, people in their 20s, they're ready to get a divorce or they're questioning a bunch of things because they married someone out of attraction or infatuation and they didn't have all the proper conversations that they needed to have to be able to succeed and they didn't build a proper foundation. And God bless them, but I can't even imagine how insecure and worried and fearful I would feel and ill-equipped to go into marriage if I hadn't had these conversations with my fiance, right? With Landon and I, we dug up every old skeleton in the closet. We had every hard conversation, and I remember I was so, nervous, but it was like a butterfly nervous of not like, oh my gosh, is he going to be mad at me if we have this conversation? Not like a spirit of fear, but like a rightful apprehension because I cared and because I wanted those conversations to go well, because all lights were pointing at least green to keep going and keep pursuing each other in the dating world, right? And so I was apprehensive because I cared and I wanted things to go well, and I knew that if they did go well, that we'd be taking some pretty serious steps forward, right? And I would have to grow, he would have to grow, we'd have to be vulnerable with each other, we'd have to strip all the masks off and the layers off, and for lack of a better term, get emotionally naked, with one another, to be able to say, hey, here's what it is, here are the things that I'm uncomfortable to talk about, but we need to talk about because we need to see if there's values alignment here, and if there's not, these are the things I'm not willing to budge on, these are the things I'm not willing to compromise on because they're who I am to my core, these are my values, And so often people don't have those conversations, and then they wonder why they're miserable, or they start pretending in a marriage or a relationship, and years go by, and it's just a freaking mess. So unnecessary. Just learn how to express your emotions. It is a very, very healthy thing to do, and you can do it one conversation, one emotion at a time. I'll give you an example, and this is something really powerful for women specifically. So women are just naturally more emotional than men. Like, we just are. It's the way God made us. I don't care what your personality is. We are more emotional than men. And if you have a super, super emotional dude, yes, are some men more reserved, more introverted, more, like, sensitive, I guess, than others? Absolutely. But, and this is controversial and I don't really care, a lot of that, I would argue, is learned behavior from not having a strong father in the home, or having too strong of a father in the home, where maybe that more sensitive, tender-spirited young man didn't identify with that and has a very opposite personality maybe of his dad, and so it's a coping mechanism where he goes to the complete other side of the pendulum because he doesn't see himself in his father. And maybe that aggressive father didn't know how to turn on his sensitive side to create space for emotions and still be nurturing as a parent, even though the mother is naturally more nurturing because it's the way that God made us. And that's where it's so important, obviously, to have a strong father and mother in a marriage and a relationship as a model for children, because we receive very different things from each parent and from the different genders. So with that being said, learning how to express, not suppress, and when to put the foot on the gas, when to put the foot on the brakes, how to process, how to negotiate through them in your own mind, just how to be a really healthy person is such an important skill. And this is such an important skill for whatever goal that you are trying to achieve in life, because naturally, again, on the journey of personal development, when you're trying to achieve a goal, you're going to have to stretch your comfort zone. You're going to have to stretch as a person, and you're going to have to get uncomfortable. And so you're going to have to face the old version of you to become the new version of you. And the old version of you is going to come with old patterns, old mindsets, old ways of doing things, old ways of expressing things. And it's so beautiful when you learn how to get over yourself and really engage this new version of you, because you'll go through a scenario that you see would have absolutely crumbled you in the past. And now you're like, wow, we actually got through that. We handled that. Like, we didn't die, So going back to kind of the feminine, then we'll go to part 3, kind of landing this plane. So a really great practice, again, that I heard from Taylor Welch that he talked about with his 5-year-old daughter, is that he'll notice that she's getting super worked up about something, or maybe she's having exacerbated emotions towards something that he's like, dude, this just doesn't make sense. And so pretty frequently he will just get down on her level and he'll say, baby girl, do you just need to cry for a little bit? And she'll say, yes, daddy. And I'll never forget watching this, and I sent it to my husband, and it was right after I had Willow. And of course, there's hormones raging, your body's changing, you're not sleeping, postpartum, all these different things. And so I watched that and I sent it to him, and I was able to communicate very vulnerably. And I said, babe, I think I'm going to need 5 or 10 minutes to just cry every day for the next whatever days. Can you just be there for me? Can you just listen? Can I lay on your chest and just, I don't need you to do anything. I just need you to be there for me. And he was like, absolutely, I can do that, babe. And he loved it, because men are fixers and they love to know their exact expectations of what you need from them. And for me, women, we just need space held for our emotions and to be vulnerable and to get to be in our feminine and get to be that softer version of ourselves, right? That's not the time for me to be CEO, boss babe, entrepreneur. Like, that's where I need to be I'm feeling like the little 9-year-old version of myself, right? And so strong, Christ-centered men will know how to hold space for that. In Jesus' name. For my husband's amazing. Shout out to Landon. So for the first 2 weeks after Willow was born, it was so awesome, because rather than trying to understand every single thing I was feeling and quantify it and talk it out and all these things, which normally Landon and I are both talk it out kind of people, I just said, okay, it's that time. And I could just feel my emotions bubbling up, where I was like, everything is wrong. I don't know why it's wrong, but it's wrong. And I was able to turn to him and I just said, babe, it's that time. I need to cry. And he'd say, okay, come here. And we'd just be laying down, and, we'd make sure Willow was fed, whatever, so that she was pacified for a little bit. And I would just literally soak up his entire shirt, just bawling my eyes out, and just would need to feel the feels. And then I was fine. And it was like I pushed the refresh button. We took out the trash. We cleaned it up. and that emotion was expressed. And then it was so cool because I was able to identify, here's what's going on, here's what I think that I'm feeling. And sometimes when we don't allow ourselves to cry or to push that reset button, it's very hard for us to access our prefrontal cortex because our amygdala, which is where the emotions are happening, is just raging. And so you literally physically cannot put words to what you're feeling until you dump out that trash, if you will. And that brings me to the third type of way that we emote, and that is to escape. And escaping emotion is never healthy. And we get to this place only when we have not properly processed our emotions. And that's where, again, you get someone that is technically in a marriage, but it's just nobody's home, right? Or technically taking this course or getting their degree, but they're not passionate about it. There's no life, right? And I really want to encourage you guys to just be aware, because I think awareness is a huge part of it, of just like, don't let yourself get to this place. In our church, we have amazing leadership training that we talk about being in the village. And being in the village is like a code word for, hey, I'm feeling some feelings like resentment, bitterness, anger, just some feelings that have not been expressed, are building up, and I need to talk something out. You could have a code word, unicorn or rainbow, like whatever it is, and having code words to even learn how to express those things, or to say, hey, this is one of those times I need to have a conversation. Or a code word, Landon and I have a code word for like, hey, I know I'm feeling the feels and I'm not my best self right now, but I don't really have the words to communicate it yet. I need to go spend some alone time to go gather myself so I don't freak out on you. That's Landon going to the gym, or me needing to go for a walk, or taking a long shower. And we have communication structures in place for us to be able to thrive rather than blowing up at each other or suppressing it and building these layers of resentment in a marriage, right? Like which breaks your oneness and your unity. And for any of you guys who are married, know when two become one flesh and God brings people together, it is the most horrible feeling when there's even an inch of distance between you and your beloved, you and your spouse, because it's literally not the way that God created us to live. Take maybe what you'd feel between like you and your sister fighting and times it by 100, because you are one. Like God literally knits your bodies together, your hearts together, your spirits together, all the things. And so Landon and I try to be extremely diligent about crushing any of that really ability for the devil to get in between our relationship. And so it's why I love him so much. And now as parents, it's to a whole new level. And you're going to constantly be rubbing elbows with people that express things differently, but what you can control is the way that you can control your own emotions. And if you work on this now and learn how to emotionally regulate personally, then you will thrive so much more when you're in the heat of the moment, competition or your job interview or vying for that promotion, or you're sitting next to that person who just ticks you off constantly that you don't get along with very well at your workplace, or you have a family issue or whatever, right? We can control ourselves. And so do whatever you need to do to start working on this so that you can become a better person and the best version of yourself, so that you can be better to the world around you and all the people that you're called to serve. Thanks, guys, for listening. Again, download our free course at powerhousepageantry.com/free course, and I'll see you guys next week.